because it ain't going to get much better. And let's get real about it. So I think that we need to come up with ideas to attract people here and enjoy Santa Barbara. And I think this whole thing on the homeless, I mean, it's a witch hunt. There's a few panhandlers out there that are aggressive. I know some that drink vodka. How many people in their homes drink vodka and other things and are ruining the body? You drink this stuff for 20 years, you might as well say goodbye to your health. And that's what is happening in people's homes and on the streets. We see it on the streets with a few. I mean, the cops and the shelters and all that, they're running this thing. They're running people out of town. They're giving them one-way tickets out of town. I mean, it's awesome what's really happening in our community.
Isaac, I think your answer was yes, right? Yes. All right, so the question for you is, how should the city generate the money to pay for the increase?
Well, you'd be looking to for the revenue to increase as a result of the increased funding. And I would also be concerned about not being able to take that money when the revenue did increase and spend it on something else that wasn't generating any revenue. That's one of the problems as I see it in the city of Santa Barbara today. They kill the goose that lays the golden egg, and then when the goose can no longer lay, there's no farms for anyone. And I would be in a position to see that that wouldn't happen. At least I would do the best I could as far as my influence to see that it wouldn't happen. And if my colleagues on the council wanted to do otherwise, I would certainly make sure that the residents of Santa Barbara would be aware of the fact what was going on so they could have input to try to stop it.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, I answered yes, and I think the city should be run like a business. That's what I heard Dale say the other day. I think he's absolutely right, and I think when times are tough, you don't pull back on your marketing budget, you become aggressive. Here's how I think you can pay for it. You make it a performance-based increase. So you work out a deal with the Conference of Visitors Bureau, you establish a baseline, and you say, okay guys, now we want you to fill those hotel rooms. Work with the operators, fill the hotel rooms, and we'll pay you a percentage to increase your marketing budget. So they're incentivized to go out and do an even better job. I think it's easily done. The council has done it in the past when they've increased revenues for the Conference of Visitors Bureau, and it normally results in increased sales at the hotels. Look, this is a time when people aren't going to Europe. They don't have enough money. But we have 15 million people in LA who might come up and spend a day or two here. If there's one thing we have, it's very experienced hotel operators, and I'm tempted to go on just to see what Tony would do. So I think this is the time when, yes, we absolutely can afford to increase our contribution to the CDB, and I think we can do it in a way that it yields a profit to us.
Elaine?
Thank you for the question. I'd like to increase the budget if we could, just by the way it is for next year. I don't think it's feasible. We did keep the same level of funding, whereas other departments received more than 8% decrease. So that was part of that decision making. The one thing I would do to also expand on the last question in terms of helping marketing is work with the CBB in your current process to look at a self-assessment protocol and process for your hotels, and to see if that's going to work, and to work with you as mayor in trying to get that information out and get the facts across. And I think that, and it won't be used in lieu of the city funding, it would be in addition to the city funding should that process go forward. I also want to just explain a little bit about the public safety budget that we just passed. I agreed with Mr. Francisco at the first budget hearing that we should look into the police department budget for any cuts. And then when more information came up, even Mr. Francisco and I agreed that we could not add to the budget because we were already finding the ways that we needed to balance it overall. So we've kept 140 sworn positions. I've authorized to overhire in that situation each and every year since I've been on the council.
Okay. Dale wants to use his rebuttal card.
Ultimately, of course, I voted to pass the budget. I do not agree with my fellow council member Schneider about how the police department needs to be funded. I fought to keep two essential positions. The gentleman who's in charge of our weaponry, range qualifications, and the fleet manager. I also fought to keep one network technician who was in charge of keeping the mobile units in our police cars running, our mobile computers. Those positions would have cost $152,000. I was overruled. That was a huge, huge mistake. Now we have sworn officers, not out on the street, but doing those two jobs that civilians could do. Thank you.
The next subject is something that's already been touched on by a number of the candidates, but we're going to bear down on it a little bit. We're going to start with 2 yes/no questions. It's about panhandling and other public behavior. Local hotels and other businesses in the downtown and beach areas have reported problems with a certain segment of the population, including aggressive panhandling and harassment of staff during late-night shifts. First yes/no question, do you believe that these are real problems for the business community? Bob, do you want to answer?
What do you think I'm going to say, Steve?
I don't know. There's a chance. No? All right. Second question, do you support the ordinance the City Council just adopted? It's yes or no? 3 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstention. All right, and then the third question is for 1 minute. What specific additional steps should the City Council take to address these issues, starting with Bob Hanson?
About panhandling? I went to most of the meetings, and Steve Wiley basically said, freedom of speech, you can sit on a bench, and you can have a sign. And basically, the restaurant people and hotel people didn't get their way. They wanted people not to be on benches. So there's other ways you could do it. You could sit there and say, hey, you can't have a sign saying you'd like some money if you're within 25 feet of a red curb. If you notice, State Street has a red curb all the way along State Street, so you come up with that angle. But the angle of trying to get those panhandlers, and some of my friends that sit there with signs, didn't work. And the aggressive panhandlers, the last 5 years, they've written 5 tickets. So there are aggressive panhandlers. A lot of it is the alcohol that sits it off. And I think the alcohol is with our kids, with our community, with the homeless, and there's a few. Alcohol is a real problem, and that gets you fired up, gets you out there, gets you sit there and want more money for that alcohol.
Isaac, I think you answered no to the question, do you support the ordinance the City Council just adopted, right?
That is correct, and I would like to address that first.
Go ahead.
I don't understand how you are going to enforce a panhandler to pay a fine of $1,000 if they are convicted. If they had $1,000, it wouldn't be panhandling in the first place. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Not only those guys, there's others as well. I believe that if you're going to pass an ordinance, it's going to become law. There needs to be some thought put into it as far as enforcing it. The law is no good if it's not enforced. And if you don't have the resources, and some constitution you can't enforce it, then what's the purpose of even doing it in the first place? As far as the panhandling issue and the vagrants, yes, it is a problem. Do I have a specific answer to totally and completely eliminate it? No, and no one else does. What I will do is engage the community with the legal talent that we do have, including the ACLU, because when you come up with an ordinance that's going to be aggressive enough to deal with some of these issues, then you're going to have lawsuits being filed on their behalf. So I think you have to engage the whole community to come up with a workable solution.
Steve?
Well, I just did an event at Kids World Playground yesterday, and I had one of my employees with me, Tammy Sherman, and Tammy said, Steve, you gave me my first job, do you remember? I said, yes. Do you remember how bad it was when the homeless people were upset with you for trying to enforce ordinances, and you had to have someone escort me out to my car every night after work? And that's true, so we've certainly had it worse here, and when it was really bad, here's what happened. We put Gary Gillingham on the street. Gary was a police officer. He's a big guy, and I know that Chief Brazen said to him, we're not going to tolerate it. You know, our standard's higher than having people accosted on the street. And as soon as we put police officers on State Street, that problem went away. And the number of homeless people was much higher back then than it is now. So I think we have to take back our public places. And I think one key to that is we have to move the services that we offer, and they're humanitarian services, out of the downtown beachfront corridor.
Elaine?
I think it's incumbent upon the